All right, guys, happy Wednesday and welcome into another show here, AL.com Recruiting. I'm your host, Simone Eli, a sports reporter down here at Channel 5, WKRG in Mobile, alongside Ben Thomas, the guru of all things high school sports here in the state of Alabama. Behind the scenes, we have Patrick Greenfield producing the show, our guru of all the things behind the scenes, making us look good, helping us out with graphics, video, and the whole nine. Today, we took a trip to Thompson High School. We got a couple guys actually, not only some of the best in the state, but a couple of the best in the entire country. We've already went out to Thompson before, talking to Jeremiah Alexander, who is a 22 guy. These two guys are 23 guys with multiple SEC offers, Ben, and you were just up there in Alabaster talking to Tony Mitchell and Peter Woods. What's your take on these two?
They're studs. Breaking news. You're talking about, two of the top three guys in our state for the class of 2023, and Peter Woods could be the number one guy in the nation. I think he's number two right now. So you're looking at a couple of studs, pretty much have every offer you could ever want college-wise. Not sure about Tony. I think Peter may be getting close to at least narrowing down his choices this summer. I don't know if he'll commit yet. Still got obviously 2 more years. And one thing about him is, Simone, he was injured last year. He came back and played in the title game, but missed a lot of the season. So his stats from last year are not that glaring just because he missed a lot of time. But, he's just 2 stars on a star-studded team really at Thompson.
Yeah, I think this just goes to show how much depth and talent that Mark Freeman has there at Thompson High School. I mean, both these guys are on the defensive side. Both of them are rising juniors, so they still have a couple of years for the defending 7A champs looking to repeat after that crazy game. We'll get to that here in a little bit. But Ben went out to Alabaster to talk to Woods and Mitchell. Here's what they had to say. Interview's a little bit different this episode. But Ben, again, went out there, had a great conversation with these guys.
Here with 2 of the top 3 players in the state for the class of 2023, Thompson High School, defensive back Tony Mitchell, defensive lineman Peter Woods. Talking a little recruiting, guys. Peter, let's start with you. Where have you been so far, and what do you like?
Yes, sir. So I started my little recruiting visits off with Clemson. I went to Florida this past weekend. I've been to Alabama. I've been to Georgia. I've been to UCF. I've been to a few places.
Where do you got left to go that you want to go?
I don't have anything scheduled. I actually just finished my last scheduled visit, but I'm going to try to fit a few schools in there, probably in Auburn, with my coach.
I started off the first day, June 1st, Georgia Tech in Florida, then Clemson in Georgia, and I recently just went to Texas A&M this past weekend, and I'm going to be going to Miami the last week of June.
What do you like so far? What do you think that you like?
All the schools, just finally getting to see the coaches in person, even the ones I haven't met. It's been like over a year and a couple months since we could visit school, so it was good, and getting to see some of the schools I haven't visited yet, like the campus, and just experiencing something new. It was real good.
How big is that? 15 months went by before when y'all could not have a lot of contact face-to-face with these coaches and go on campus. How big is it for you in this process?
Yes, sir. It was really big for me, just being able to get off the FaceTimes and the Zooms and actually get that person-to-person relationship, see who's real and genuine. Just trying to figure out where's the best fit for me people-wise is also a big part of, if I fit to the culture, what they're doing, getting to see it in person. So that was big for me.
You got a timetable? I mean, what do you want to do? You want to make a decision soon? You're gonna wait. You're just going into junior year, so there's no hurry, I guess.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's not really a hurry for me. I don't really have a specific, I would say a specific time that I want to commit or something. A specific date. Just whenever God says. So that's just kind of where I'm vibing in between. I like some schools, but I still want to take my time with my decision.
So it's safe to say that recruiting opening back up has really, really helped out guys in every single class, but especially those rising juniors who want to get a head start on schools interested in them, schools that they're interested in. And Ben, it really seems like that's really helped specifically Peter Woods make some decisions on schools, being able to be on campus, meet with coaches, and get to know these people personally.
Yeah, I kind of got the feeling, Simone, just from talking to those two, that maybe Peter was closer than Tony in making a decision. I think he talked about maybe narrowing it down in the next month or so. I think I don't know if when these two guys will commit, but I think July will be a big month for commitments, maybe basketball and football wise. I know we got some big basketball guys in the state getting ready to maybe commit as well. But, so recruiting open again in June, a lot of guys going out and visiting, and then it'll shut down in July. And I think that's when you might see things really happen. But these two guys, I was impressed with these two guys, Simone. I watched a little bit of the workout there at Thompson, and obviously a lot of good players on that team. But I think Peter Woods, like I said, we could be talking about the number one prospect in the nation for next year.
Yeah, so often we're talking about Mark Freeman's offense, but it's really Mark Freeman's defense lately there at Thompson High School that has been incredibly dominant game in and game out. Now, this is a guy who did miss multiple games last year due to injury, but I think it's safe to say that he's proving he is one of the top players in the country, still has 2 more years, a lot to prove. Again, that's Peter Woods. And other than Alabama, I know that's obviously a big school for him, Ben. Where else did he say that he was getting looked at, interested in going?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got all the offers. He's been to UCF, which I thought was interesting. UCF getting a lot of visits. And with the Thompson guys, that has to do a lot with, well, not just Gus Malzahn, but Trey Williams, who you and I know from the St. Paul's days, one of the legends of St. Paul's football in Mobile, but also Auburn legend. And he was at Thompson last year as an assistant coach for Mark Freeman. So I think that contact is getting a lot of these Thompson guys to at least go down there and look at UCF. But, Alabama seems to be really thick on all these guys. Peter Woods, Tony Mitchell, Jeremiah Alexander, the top prospect in this year's class, who we talked to a few weeks ago. So, I mean, you'll hear all the big names with all 3 of these guys.
Switching gears over to Tony Mitchell now, defensive back over there for Thompson, a guy who is also incredibly impressive. Highlights here against Gadsden City. Last year had 75 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, and 3 interceptions. Just looking at those stats alone, Ben, seems like he's a pretty diverse athlete. He is, Simone, and of course he's they got a good back half there. And at Thompson, I think he was actually really close to committing last year. During the season, and then decided not to. Alabama's certainly been on him for a long time. Every SEC school pretty much you can see him there. I mean, he's just a playmaker in that defensive backfield. And it's when you're talking about these two guys standing out, Simone, you got a team that has a bunch of standouts. So that I think that really speaks to what they got going at Thompson. Now, Mark Freeman might have shut us off, Simone, when you said the defense has really stood out because he's an offensive guy, obviously, but they've been very good on both sides of the ball. Absolutely. And I think it's safe to say that not only are they talented, just watching them on the field and at Thompson High School, but let's remember that Thompson is in arguably the toughest region in the state, definitely for 7A, but that 7A Region 3 has so much talent. We often see a lot of guys, SEC-type caliber players coming out of that Region 3, and just looking at some of these stats, safe to say that Tony Mitchell is one of those guys that we've been talking about year in year out from this Region 3 class, Ben. That's just a fantastic region of players.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we're always talking about that, but when you got Hoover and Thompson, Hewitt Trustful, all those guys have multiple prospects, and to win that region, you almost have to go through it twice. I mean, Thompson has had to beat Hoover twice the last couple of years just to get to the state title game. Hewitt had to play Hoover twice, in the playoffs. So it's brutal. A couple other notes with Thompson, Simone. Jax Van Zant, their middle linebacker, committed recently to North Texas. He's kind of a guy that doesn't get a lot of attention because of all these stars around him. But I talked to Sean DeFore, the defensive coordinator, this week, and he talked about what a bulldog this guy was. 89 tackles last year, 10 tackles for a loss, 5 sacks. He is kind of the heart. He doesn't
want to hear about how good that defense is over there in Alabaster, but it is that good.
Yeah, I mean, he's the heart of that lineup there. And also Jeremiah Alexander, who like I said, we've had on the show. Everybody knows he's the top prospect, almost the consensus top prospect in the state. I saw Simone that your friend and ours, Christina from WBRC in Birmingham, had an interview with him recently where he says now Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Clemson, top 4 for him. Wow. Getting close probably to making a decision there. But, I mean, that's a who's who of national football powers there, and somebody's going to get a good one there.
Yep. You said a minute ago, Ben, that Peter Woods discuss Central Florida and a couple guys over on that staff, or really one guy, Trey Williams, the former Auburn linebacker, how much he has kind of played a role in helping recruit those Thompson players. They got guys year in and year out that could certainly go over to Central Florida. Here's what Woods had to say about that Gus Malzahn program and how they're trying to kind of keep their hand in these Alabama recruits.
I noticed they're recruiting a lot of guys from Alabama, and I assume part of the attraction here is because Trey Williams was here last year. What did you like about them? What does that feel like for you down there?
Well, it all started off with me and Coach Trey having a great relationship here, and him coaching me up on D-line things. Because as you know, he played at Auburn, played linebacker, so he's really knowledgeable in recruiting and the game of football. So I took a lot in from him, and just knowing how he was here kind of sparked me to let me go see what they're like over there at UCF, and they got the new staff, Coach Malzahn, Coach T. Will, Coach Ingram, Coach Martin, great people in person. So I had a really great time, really fun guys. They know what they're talking about, very knowledgeable in the game. So really good school.
Let's just take a moment to talk about how much bigger Peter Woods is than you, Ben, in that video. You could not be a Division I defensive lineman for sure. But Peter Woods, 16, 17 years old, maybe. That dude is a beast.
Look, I'm a long way from my playing days, Simone. But yeah, he's.
They were playing days, Ben? I didn't know they were playing days.
Well, about 30 years ago, Simone. But in the ring, I might be able to take him in some type of handicap match, possibly. But yeah, he talked about Central UCF. I'm just interested in UCF because I don't know that they're going to get any of these big name guys. Probably not. But I think having them on campus will help Gus Malzahn and that staff. Jeremiah Alexander was actually there this past weekend. In fact, when I was at Thompson on Monday, he was not there at Thompson because his plane had been delayed out of UCF. There had been some weather problems or something. So we're trying to still get Gus on the show, Simone, and so far no luck. But I'm interested to see if they can get some guys out of Alabama to come to that program.
Well, maybe if we keep talking to guys he's interested in, he'll come on the show here in the next couple of weeks. But, Ben, I think it's both of these guys have certainly benefited from recruiting opening back up after more than a year of this COVID situation, keeping guys from being able to go on campuses and meet with coaches. I know both of us were out at the South Alabama 7-on-7 yesterday. A lot of talent out there from the Mobile area and throughout the entire state. And there was also guys down there whose teams weren't down there, but they were meeting with Coach Womack, who straight up said, we want to get guys from the Mobile and Baldwin County area, 5 guys a year. But I think it's just a great thing to see these players being able to make a decision on their future and actually get the full experience on campus now that recruiting has opened back up.
Yeah, I think it was awesome. I enjoyed being out there. It's something we didn't get to do last year. They didn't have any 7-on-7s, and just to see these guys compete, I got to look at Shamar James from Faith Academy, who's Alabama, Florida in the top for him. He's a linebacker probably in college, but also plays receiver for them.
When's he going to make a decision?
Do what now?
Not to interrupt you, but when does he plan on making a decision? Any thoughts on that?
Actually, I messaged with him just today, and he said no change. So I don't think it's urgent. You just never know with these kids. One thing can strike them, and they can make a decision at any point. I also saw Robert Woodyard out there. Simone talked to him. He is the linebacker for Williamson, who's kind of almost forgotten because he's just not much of a social media guy. Mm-hmm. He's been committed to Alabama for a year. He committed last June to Alabama, and he's been one of the top prospects in his class for 3 years now, and I think he's rated number 5 or something like that. Still says it's all Alabama. The interesting thing about him, and I have a story on him on AL.com right now if you want to check it out, is he hasn't taken any visits. We're talking to all these guys about where they've been and where they're going, and Robert said, I've just been busy. I've been working hard, and I want to get out. He wants to take all 5 of his official visits, but he hadn't been anywhere this month. So I thought that was interesting. But his new coach, Melvin Pete, who just took over the Williamson program, I asked him, I'm like, what do you think? He's like, well, I've seen a lot of great players, but only a few can make me say wow. And every time Robert Woodyard's on the field, he makes me say wow.
Yeah, on that note, I mean, when we were out there, I mean, these guys obviously are not in pads for a 7-on-7, just, wearing helmets and shirts or that dry fist tops and shorts. But it looks like he's wearing pads. That's how big of a guy this is. He's like a man among boys out there. He was super impressive to watch yesterday. I saw them in action in tournament play later in the afternoon. But I think one thing about guys waiting to go on visits, Ben, I know you've heard this before, is a lot of guys want to do these visits in the fall when they can go get that game atmosphere and be a part of that and see what things are like at games. So I don't know if that's, I heard that from a couple players. Maybe that's part of his decision-making, is wanting to wait to see what things are like on a Saturday.
Yeah, it could be. He just didn't seem like he was even concerned about it, that he knows where he's going to go, and he does want to get out there. And, of course, of note, Antonio Coleman, former Auburn star, is his defensive coordinator. Not to say Antonio would never push him to Auburn, but, I think he's advised him to take all his visits and find the right place for him. So you're right about the 7-on-7, by the way, Simone. If you've never been to a 7-on-7, they don't wear pads. Sometimes their jerseys, their names certainly aren't on their jerseys. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's hard to see who's who, but it's not hard to pick out Shamar James or Robert Woodyard on a field of 100 football players.
No. Ben, a lot of recruiting action going on. Let's talk real quick, updates on other guys throughout the state, some of the state's top recruits.
Yeah, I think the main update from, we didn't have a show last week, our gold standard show, but Lucas Taylor from down here at St. Paul's, big offensive lineman, 6'5", 310, one of the top 20 prospects in the state. He's a class of 2022 guy. They won the state championship last year, went 15-0. I think we're the only team in the state to go 15-0. He had been committed to LSU for a long time, Simone. I think he committed either last summer or early last fall, was really sold on them. But he went down to LSU. I don't think he got a great feeling down there. They recently fired the offensive line coach that he had dealt with. So he ended up going to Mississippi State and really liked it there. So he decommitted from LSU and committed to Mississippi State. So that's a huge get for Mike Leach and that stuff, because Lucas Taylor is a grinder. He can play.
All right, Ben Thomas, we appreciate that. I see one comment here in the comments. Any information on the Auburn quarterback battle? They kind of remain tight-lipped throughout summer workouts, things like that, on what's going on. There are a lot of guys there on the Plains that could be the starter, the guy for Brian Harsin. Hopefully we'll have Harsin on here at some point on the recruiting show, Ben, but any information that there's a couple. I know that at this point he's got a quarterback room that's got probably 4 guys that could potentially be SEC caliber guys.
Well, I think they're excited about getting TJ Finley, the LSU transfer, in there to kind of push Bo Nix and put some heat on him. I think Bo Nix is the guy until he's not, and I think a lot of it depends on the offensive line play in front of him. But I know they were fired up to get TJ Finley, who's a proven starter in the SEC, started several games, half the games for LSU. So I think that can only help them. And then that kind of transitions into, what quarterbacks are in their future. I talked to Connor Harrell also at Thompson, and we're going to have him next week, I think, on the show. And he's talking – Auburn and Alabama have talked to him a little bit, but really have yet to pull the trigger on him. So it'll be interesting to see if one of those – this Class 7A back of the year – be interesting to see if one of the schools pulls the trigger on him.
We will see how many Thompson guys we can have throughout this entire year here on AL.com recruiting. Right now we're at 3. That number could increase. Certainly the top team in 7A. It's probably the top team in the state, one of the top teams in the country for sure. They're in Alabaster. But guys, a great show today. Appreciate Thompson players Peter Woods and Tony Mitchell talking recruiting with us. We have another great guest coming up for next week. We'll be sure to tease that on social media at Ben Thomas Preps. Follow him at Simone Eli TV. Patrick Greenfield, the producer in the back. Guys, thanks for tuning in again this week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.